Today, we're diving into a book that really challenges how we think about our own bodies, The Body Electric. The whole premise is that maybe we're not just a collection of chemical reactions, but that we're fundamentally electrical beings. So let's explore its theories on how electricity and magnetism might just be the missing piece in our understanding of biology. The book kicks off with this really powerful quote from Nikola Tesla, and it perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack. The idea is, if we want to truly understand the body, we have to start looking beyond just its chemistry and start thinking about its energy, its electrical properties. So right here, this is the fundamental split in thinking. Most of modern medicine, you could say, treats the body like this incredibly complex chemical factory. But this book comes along and proposes a totally different model. What if the body is more like an electrical circuit? And it makes a pretty interesting point. We already use things like ECGs and EEGs to measure our body's electrical signals to figure out what's wrong, but we almost never think about using electricity to make things right. To really help us wrap our heads around this, the book uses this fantastic analogy. Think of your body as a kind of biological battery. When things like stress, poor diet, or whatever else cause your voltage to drop, your systems start to get sluggish. Your immune system, for example, is like a security camera running on a low battery. The picture gets all blurry, and it can't clearly tell who the good guys are and who the intruders are. So the goal of the ideas in this book is basically to recharge that battery. Okay, before we go any further, we absolutely have to highlight the book's own disclaimer. It says very clearly that this information is for educational and research purposes. It's all considered experimental, and none of it has been evaluated by the FDA. The author really stresses that you should consult a healthcare professional for any medical concerns, and we want to echo that loud and clear. We're here to explain the ideas in the book, not to endorse them. All right, with that important note out of the way, let's dive into the first major premise. This theory about how tiny little electrical currents might interact with pathogens floating around in our bloodstream. The book uses another really simple but powerful analogy to explain a super complex biological process. It calls it the key and lock mechanism. The idea is that pathogens, like viruses or bacteria, have these little protein keys on their surface. And our healthy cells, well, they have corresponding locks or receptors. If the key fits the lock, boom, the intruder is in. And here on this slide, you can see exactly what they're talking about. On the left, you've got the pathogen's key fitting perfectly into the cell's lock. But on the right, well, after a microcurrent is applied, the theory is that this little jolt of electricity actually blunts the key. It changes its shape just enough so it doesn't fit anymore. Entry denied. So the whole process is supposed to work something like this. Step 1, a pathogen cruises up to a healthy cell. Step 2, a small electrical current is introduced into the blood. Step 3, this current supposedly messes with the pathogen's protein key. And finally, step 4, since the key doesn't fit the lock anymore, it can't get in and just gets flushed out by the body. So you're probably wondering, how do you actually apply this current? Well, the book describes placing electrodes right here on the wrist, specifically over the radial and ulnar arteries. And the logic behind this is pretty clever, actually. It's the spot on the body where a huge amount of blood flows really fast and super close to the surface of the skin. It's the perfect access point. The author calls this whole process blood purification. It's all about cleaning up the main highway of the body. You guessed it, the bloodstream. Okay, but this brings up a pretty obvious question, right? One the book actually addresses. If you're cleaning the highway, what about all the clever intruders who see what's happening and decide to get off at the nearest exit? The ones that go hide out in places where a simple current might not be able to reach them. And that's exactly where the second part of this whole system comes into play. It's designed specifically to deal with those sneaky, hidden intruders. The book actually calls these hiding spots safe zones. And we're talking about places like your lymph nodes, inside your bone marrow, or deep within dense organ tissue. Basically, anywhere that isn't part of that main circulatory highway and is way harder for a simple electrical current to get to. So, to solve this problem, the book turns to a really fundamental principle of physics, Faraday's law of induction. Now, to put it simply, it just means that a changing magnetic field can create an electrical current inside a conductor, like our body, without ever physically touching it. As you can see here, that magnetic field can pass right through skin and muscle to get to those deeper areas. The solution that's proposed is a device they call a magnetic pulsar. What it does is create this strong but very brief magnetic pulse. And that pulse is theorized to generate those tiny currents deep inside the body's tissues, the so-called safe zones. The whole idea is to flush those hiding intruders out and force them back into the bloodstream, where that first device we talked about can then deal with them. So we've got a system for the blood and a system for the deep tissues. But the protocol doesn't stop there. It actually includes two more elements, which you can think of as the cleanup and defense crew. And these two support elements are colloidal silver, which is framed as the defender, and ozonated water, which is described as the cleanup crew. So first up, the defender, colloidal silver. It's really just microscopic particles of silver suspended in a liquid. The book claims that these silver ions have this unique ability to attach themselves to the enzymes that single-celled organisms use for respiration. And the result? Well, the organism basically can't breathe anymore. And now for the cleanup crew. After you've neutralized all these intruders, your body still has to get rid of all the waste. The book suggests using ozonated water for this. See, ozone, or O3, is just an oxygen molecule with a very unstable extra atom. It's just dying to get rid of that extra oxygen, which then goes on to oxidize, or basically burn up toxins, making them way easier for the body to flush out. So, this final section of the book kind of shifts gears from theory to practice. It gets into the engineering and, more importantly, the safety side of things for anyone interested in the DIY or biohacker aspect of all this. And what's really interesting here is the contrast. On the left, you see a basic schematic for that blood electrification unit, which the book presents as a pretty manageable hobby project. But then on the right, it gives this big warning that building the magnetic pulsar is a whole different beast. A poorly made homemade coil can overheat and fail, whereas a professional one is engineered to focus that magnetic field safely and effectively. Okay, and this next slide is maybe the most important one of all. Seriously, the book is packed with critical safety warnings. For the magnetic pulsar, it's a huge danger for anyone with pacemakers or metallic implants. For the ozonated water, it warns you to never, ever inhale the gas directly. And just in general, it repeats over and over that these methods are experimental and that getting professional medical advice is absolutely essential. The main takeaway is safety first, always. As we start to wrap this all up, the book leaves you with this really empowering final thought. The core message is that by understanding your body as an electrical system, you can shift from being just a passive passenger to becoming the active engineer of your own energy. And that really leaves us with the big, provocative question that this whole book poses. We already use electricity to diagnose what's wrong with us all the time. The ideas in this book ask us to really think about its potential role in therapy, in making us better. So is the future of medicine electrical? It's a massive question that challenges our current way of thinking and definitely leaves us with a lot to chew on.